Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to Tuesday night in the book of Habakkuk. And I'm going to start by reading you the section of text that we're going to look at. I don't always do that, but I think on this occasion it'll help. Because initially what we're looking at is a series of woes. And I want us to see how beautifully this little section of text is constructed. So there's much to be admired in the construction, and so I'm going to read it to you. So we start at verse 4. See, he is puffed up. That's the Babylonian, the Babylonians, and particularly the king. So see, he is puffed up. His desires are not upright, but the righteous will live by his faith. Indeed, wine betrays him. He's arrogant and never at rest, because he is as greedy as the grave, and like death, he's never satisfied. He gathers to himself all the nations and takes captive all the peoples. Will not all of them taunt him with ridicule and scorn, saying, woe to him who piles up stolen goods and makes himself wealthy by extortion? How long must this go on? Will not your debtors suddenly arise? Will they not wake up and make you tremble? Then you'll become their victim. Because you have plundered many nations, the peoples who are left will plunder you, for you have shed man's blood. You destroyed lands and cities and everyone in them. Woe to you who builds his realm by unjust gain, to set his nest on high, to escape the clutches of ruin. You've plotted the ruin of many people, shaming your own house and forfeiting your life. The stones of the wall will cry out, and the beams of the woodwork will echo it. Woe to him who builds a city with bloodshed and establishes a town by crime. Has not the Lord Almighty determined that the people's labor is only fuel for the fire, that nations exhaust themselves for nothing? For the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the water covers the sea. Woe to him who gives drink to his neighbors, pouring it from the wineskin until they are drunk, so that he can gaze on their naked bodies. You'll be filled with shame instead of glory. Now it's your turn. Drink and be exposed. The cup of the Lord's right hand is coming round to you, and disgrace will cover your glory. The violence you have done to Lebanon will overwhelm you, and your destruction of animals will terrify you. For you have shed a man's blood, you've destroyed lands and cities and everyone in them. Oh, what value is an idol, since a man has carved it, or an image that teaches lies? For he who makes it trusts in his own creation. He makes idols that cannot speak. Woe to him who says to wood, come to life, or to lifeless stone, wake up. Can it give guidance? It is covered with gold and silver, but there is no breath in it. But the Lord is in his holy temple. Let all the earth be silent before him. Well, the way that I sort of came to this text was to try first to see what I could see, and sometimes, like today when I was out in Temple Fortune, it helps to know where your final destination is going to be. And in this case, it was Bridge Lane Church. And so I knew in the end we'd end up at Bridge Lane Church. So the first thing I sort of started to do was look for eschatological elements of this text. I looked for what, not where I was, but where I will be in the end. You know, it's and you could summarize it by saying like many stories, that it all ends happily ever after. The old-fashioned stories used to end with this phrase, it'll all end happily ever after. And it all ends happily ever after because the Lord is in his holy temple and can see everything. And it's because he's able to see everything from his holy temple that he can promise that one day the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the water covers the sea. Chapter 2, verse 14. So I had in mind this idea of a military strike, of the extraction, let's say, of hostages held in some remote place where the captors don't know they're being watched, and they're completely unaware of anything outside of their direct experience. And yet what we see take place is a military extraction based on what I'm calling Psalm 113 intelligence, with the accuracy of a sniper and the remote control of a drone. These are war images that strike me as relevant, because what's going on in this text is a holy war, and it's very relevant to us even tonight. I think I saw on the news just this evening that there was been a drone strike on Moscow, which is going to escalate the whole situation even further than it's already is, or has already been revealed to be. So when you are in a situation of where your external circumstances don't make sense, the first thing that God wants to say to us is that it'll be all right on the night. It'll all end happily ever after. And because last week Fiona so usefully told us, she gave us these trust me, wait for me, live for me. Those were the ideas that she brought out of the first few verses. Let's see. I want you to see that there's a pattern, that God will come to judge, and the punishment will suit the crime. The punishment will suit the crime. So the first thing that happens in verse 4 and 5 is Habakkuk has said, how can you send this horrible man to do the work of your righteousness when you're holy? How can you do that? And in a sense, what the Lord says to the prophet and to us first is, I know this man just as I know you. So Psalm 139 applies as much to Simon Lissack as it does to Simon Ellman, as it does to Joanne Murphy or Nick or Valerie or Jennifer or Dennis, any of us. It applies to all human beings. And yet, and repeatedly, we have seen in the minor prophets and more broadly in the Bible that most of us behave as if he doesn't know us and he doesn't see. So the first thing that Habakkuk's going to learn is that the Lord knows exactly what this man is like. Wine betrays him. He's arrogant and never at rest. The Lord chooses an instrument who is arrogant and never at rest. He's greedy as the grave. He's like death is never satisfied. Too much is never enough. Greed is sometimes described in the Bible as like salt water. The more you drink, the more you've got, the thirstier you become. So this, first of all, in a way, you instead of seeing this great military leader as somebody who's sort of almost to be admired, his military prowess, his success, all those things, actually, he's never satisfied. He would know the Mick Jagger song, the Rolling Stones song, I can't get no satisfaction. He doesn't have the peace that flows from a relationship with God. He's got the lack of peace, the lack of satisfaction that comes when you achieve everything the world can offer and you still, it's not enough. When you've got a 10 million pound yacht, you still look at the man with a 20 million pound yacht and envy him. Not that I've got either of them, but you understand that that's the nature of man. In Ecclesiastes, it says that I looked and saw that every effort of man, of humanity, was out of the envy of his neighbor. I think it's Ecclesiastes. It's between chapter 2 and chapter 4. And then look what he's doing. He's gathering to himself all the nations and taking captive all the peoples. So he's gathering all the peoples and all the nations. Does that remind you of somebody else's purpose? I talk about this quite a lot. That God's purpose was, now you know, I've given it away. It's almost antichrist-like. It appears from the outside like this guy is building this incredible empire, gathering all the nations, every tongue, tribe, and nation together under one king. And that's what it looks like on the outside. But what we're promised in the rest of this text is it's temporary. It's something that appears to offer a worldwide kingly rule. But in fact, what we will see happen is that throughout the powerful becomes powerless, the victimizer becomes a victim, the warrior becomes a wimp, the success becomes a failure. And the way in which God executes these judgments is not so much through thunderbolt and lightning, but through the consequences of sin. So, and this is still a New Testament relevant idea, because it's exactly what happens in the opening chapters of Romans, that God hands people over to their own proclivities. It's what it's in a sense what happened with Pharaoh. Pharaoh hardened his heart, and God let him harden his heart. So from verse 6 onwards, we've got a taunting song. We've got 5 woes that represent a taunt song. So a taunt song, it's not a pleasant thing. The Premiership finished last weekend, and there was a football match where the one team was losing, but the other team was getting relegated, and the fans of the team that were losing saying, yeah, we're losing, but you're going down. They were pouring scorn on this team's victory because they had the greater victory. There's a sense that, well, it's using the words ridicule and scorn, but they're being used as a prophecy that will one day be fulfilled. And again, I want to remind you that this isn't the first time we've seen this. At the end of the book of Deuteronomy, Moses teaches Israel a song about their how they will fail in the future. And the text makes it very clear that Moses is to teach them this song so that they know the song when they go into the land, and they know that God knew in advance what they would do. But this is a taunt. This is a taunt and ridicule song that is sung by the people that appear to have failed in this world. Woe to him who piles up stolen goods and makes himself wealthy by extortion. How long must this go on? Will not your debtors suddenly arise? Will they not wake up and make you tremble? Then you will become their victim, because you've plundered many nations. The peoples who are left will plunder you. This is what I mean by the punishment suits the crime. It's very difficult to understand why God permits the suffering that is necessary in this process. But at that point, we have to say, we can't fully understand why he permits it, but we do know that he understands it personally because of the life and death of our Messiah, because of the way that, because Jesus experienced suffering despite being righteous, we know that the Trinity fully understand what suffering is like. So initially, we have this idea of debtors, people that have been extorted by the wealthy, suddenly find themselves plundering the wealthy. Again, in a way, you can see that happening when the Exodus takes place and Israel plunders Egypt, when God turns the heart of the people, the Egyptian people, to give generously they're well, he says he makes them well disposed. And then there's another theme that comes through this text 3 times, this idea of shedding man's blood. For you have shed human blood, you've destroyed lands and cities and everyone in them. Cities and land and humanity are good in the sense of they're part of God's plan for the final. They were part of his plan in the beginning, and they'll be part of his plan at the end. But what we see here is this literally vicious cycle of imperial conquerors achieving temporary success, and then they themselves experiencing what they inflicted on others. It's the very opposite of loving your neighbor as yourself. Verse 9, woe to him who builds his realm by unjust gain, to set his nest on high, to escape the clutches of ruin. You've plotted the ruin of many peoples, shaming your own house and forfeiting your life. The stones of the wall will cry out, and the beams of the woodwork will echo it. There's a lot of discussion about this, the stones of the walls crying out and the beams of the woodwork echo it. I don't know whether the trees of the field will literally clap their hands. So I don't know if this is a metaphor or I don't know if Jesus, when he talked about the stones themselves would cry, it was easier to turn, the stones themselves would cry out. I don't know if they literally would cry out. But what it's saying is, if you build a house on unjust gain, even the very things that you build will turn against you. You've plotted ruin of people, so you will be ruined. You've taken lives, so your life will be forfeited. Verse 12, woe to him who builds a city with bloodshed and establishes a town by crime. Has not the Lord Almighty determined that the people's labor is only fuel for the fire, that the nations exhaust themselves for nothing? You can build a city with bloodshed. The idea there is that somebody else builds a city and you come in and kill everyone and take the city. That's building a city with bloodshed as opposed to building it through your own labor. So then you can establish a town by crime. I wonder, it reminds me of the way that certain parts of certain cities get taken over by crime lords. You know, you control, like the favelas in Brazil, particularly in the capital. You've got these cities that are totally run by criminals. They're horrendous places for the righteous to live. They live in fear. And so again, what we're seeing is as Habakkuk listens to God explain that he's in control and that he's going to bring everything to a perfect conclusion, what we're seeing are situations that were relevant 2,000 years, 3,000 years ago, and that's still relevant today. And again, what we're supposed to think then, I think, is to take a moment to think how amazing that is. Even if they do the labor themselves, it's for nothing because another nation's going to come and take it. Because no kingdom can be sustained apart from the king's kingdom, the kingdom of Messiah, God's kingdom. And so that's, once we've got to this point in 14, that's when we see, for the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the water covers the sea. Today we were talking to an Orthodox Jewish man. We literally went and knocked on a synagogue door, and he came out just as we were thinking that the synagogue was closed. And we were talking to him about his view was that only Israel will be the land filled with the glory of the knowledge of God, and that God will somehow tolerate all the other religions and just correct them somehow and point them all to him. And I use this today and say, no, the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the water covers the sea. This is our great future, and what should instill great fear in the man I saw today. The earth, the whole of the earth, the world, will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord. It's not just knowledge about God, but they will know his glory. In John's gospel, Jesus is very much the full revealer of God's glory. And also we've done Hebrews together, haven't we? So that's also a big theme in Hebrews, and in pretty much in many other places as well. In Amos chapter 5, verse 18, it says, "Woe to you who long for the day of the Lord. Why do you long for it? It will be darkness, not light." Sadly, I didn't have this verse to my fingertips this afternoon. I found it in the study that I was doing to prepare for this evening. The rabbinic Jewish view that the Messiah will come and fill the earth with his glory is something that they look forward to. But Amos asked the question, why do you long for this day? Why do you look forward to it? It'll be darkness, not light. And last week, Fiona was showing us that it is only light for those who are living by faith. That the Talmud very kind of astutely, I think, summarizes that verse 4 about the righteous will live by his faith as being a summary of the 613 commandments. The only person that can look forward to the earth being filled with the knowledge of the glory of God, it is one who is living by faith. And so when we were discussing, when he was saying to us that Christians make far too much of the Messiah, that Judaism doesn't focus on the Messiah in the same way, it's shocking, because as the waters cover the sea, it looks more like the judgment of Noah. It looks more like the judgment of the world than the rescue that we see Noah experience. The subject that's been introduced here is the glory of the Lord. It's the glory of knowing the personal God. Kavod, the word glory, has a sense of heaviness about it. Then look, woe to him who gives drink to his neighbors, pouring it from the wineskin till they're drunk, so that they can gaze on the nakedness of others. See, what happens is that, so okay, he says, I have watched you use alcohol to your own advantage. You might be able to use it to take advantage of others, but in the end, verse 16, you'll be filled with shame instead of glory. You try to use wine for your glory, but it'll end up as your shame, because now it's your turn, verse 16, drink and be exposed. Not exposed by drinking wine and ending up naked, but being exposed to the cup that's in the Lord's right hand. And the Lord's right hand is coming round to you. There's even mercy in this. We had a French teacher called Mr. Brewer, and he was really a PE teacher, and he wasn't a very good French teacher, and he basically went through the book, and we knew he would just work through the questions. The only thing we didn't know was whether he was going to go clockwise or anti-clockwise. So you could, as soon as you know which way he was going and who was picked, you knew the question was which question was coming for you, or if you get no questions. Here he says, This judgment is coming round to you. He's pleading, saying, the judgment's coming round. Please don't drink. Don't drink this cup. The cup from the Lord's right is coming round, and disgrace will cover your glory. Because he will not share his glory with another. So if the knowledge of the glory of the Lord is going to cover the sea, then this cup will lead to this cup of wine will lead to disgrace. So he's taken the image that he's taken one image and taken it from from positive to negative. The violence you'll have done will overwhelm you. Done to Lebanon will overwhelm you, and the destruction of your animals will terrify you. For you've shed a man's blood and destroyed the lands and the cities and everyone in them. Verse 17. Another wildly accurate 2,000-year-old text. The violence you've done to Lebanon. Lebanon is a source of trees. So we talk about deforestation today in the Amazon rainforest to produce cows cheap enough for McDonald's to sell hamburgers for £2 each. Well, this is the same deforestation, this time for military purpose. So you've got eco-violence. Then you get destruction of your destruction of animals will terrify you. Think about factory farming. I saw a horrible thing about factory farming yesterday, the way that we destroy animals to feed ourselves. It's almost a gruesome modern equivalent is that we'll end up on the hook because of the way that we've put animals on the hook. And then the land and the cities that God intended for us to live within in peace have been a source where for bloodshed. No better illustration than the war in Ukraine. And I think that's where, in a sense, what he's going to say next is a summary of all he's been said, because the last section is a section about idolatry from verse 18 to 19. What value is an idol since a man has carved it, or an image that teaches lies? For he who makes it trusts in his own creation. Throughout Scripture, God is appealing to us to trust in him, not ourselves. And yet our constant temptation is to drift away from that. We know how crazy it is to say to a piece of wood, come to life, or to a lifeless stone, wake up, or to expect a stone to give guidance to us. Yet we are drawn like magpies to the shiny gold and silver of this world. But there's no breath in it. So, kind of having gone through the text, I found 2 Psalms really helpful as I thought about this. There is plenty we could say about the woes. But first, I just want to say something about these 2 Psalms. The first one is Psalm 37. Psalm 37, verse 1 says, do not fret because of evil men or be envious of those who do wrong, for like grass they will soon wither, like green plants they will soon die. Trust in the Lord and do good, dwell in the land and enjoy safe pasture. Delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. Commit your way to the Lord, trust him, and he will do this. He'll make your righteousness shine like the dawn, the justice of your cause like the noonday sun. Be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. It summarizes what Fiona was saying last week and it's the lesson that we take from the text we've got this week. And then the other psalm is Psalm 73. I like Psalm 73 in this context particularly because it starts with the description of the psalmist fretting because evil men seem to be prospering. So the very thing that Psalm 37 says he shouldn't do, the psalmist admits to doing in Psalm 73. As for me, my foot slipped, I nearly lost my foothold, for I envied the arrogant when I saw the prosperity of the wicked. They have no struggles, their bodies are healthy and strong, they're free from the burdens common to man, they're not plagued by human ills, pride is their necklace, and they clothe themselves with violence. They scoff and speak with malice, their mouths lay claim to heaven, they drink up waters in abundance. They say, how can God know? Does the Most High have knowledge? This is what the wicked are like, carefree, and they increase in wealth. Surely in vain I kept my heart pure, in vain I washed my hands in innocence. All day long I've been plagued and punished every morning. If I had said, I'll speak thus, I would have betrayed a generation of your children. But when I understood this, it was oppressive to me until I entered the sanctuary of God and understood their final destination. When I started this, I talked about the final destination, knowing where you're heading. The psalmist in Psalm 73 starts off envying those who are succeeding in the world, and he does that, and he thinks, I've held to my righteous standards, my biblical standards, in a world that's gone off course in every possible direction, and I've gained nothing. It's a woe is me situation. But actually, when he entered into the presence of God and saw the fate of the wicked, then he realized that whatever he had suffered for his righteousness was nothing compared to the suffering that the wicked would experience. So we're supposed to see, I think what I see as I look at Habakkuk is a continued call to share the gospel. Throughout, in the book of Isaiah, Isaiah says, woe is me, I'm a man of unclean lips, in a people of unclean lips, but I've seen the King, the Lord Almighty. He's in a situation where he knows who he is, and he knows who God is, and he knows that means trouble. It's the same, I suppose, for some of the disciples when they realize who Jesus is. Who is this man? Even the waves, the wind and the waves obey him. And it's Isaiah who moves through from general principles about, for example, chapter 3, verse 9, this general principle of the what goes around comes around, that they've brought disaster on themselves. He also gives 5 woes, which I think Habakkuk is saying, by choosing 5 woes, he's allowing you to put those 2 sections together and see that they're consistent. But whether the king that's in focus is Babylon or the Assyrians or the Medes or the Persians, it doesn't matter. The whole Bible story revolves around this coming kingdom, a kingdom that was shattered in the garden. And then we see the story of the Pharaoh in Egypt being overturned. The Assyrians get overturned, the Babylonians get overturned, the Persians and the Medes get overturned, Herod and Pilate get overturned. Ultimately, every world leader, look in the book of Daniel, there's like a long list: Darius, Belshazzar, Cyrus. and then many unnamed kings and unnamed kingdoms to come are overturned. Those are all woes. Those are all woes which are divine judgments that are coming, and that each one of us would be subject to, was it not for God's rescue of us. For whilst we were still sinners, Christ died for us, that he came to make his enemies his friends. He's the one who is plucking us out of the fire of God's judgment. And he's saying that our access to that escape is by faith alone, so that we can't claim works for ourselves. But it's not just that we can't claim works for ourselves, it's also that even if that our righteous acts are filthy rags before him, that our hearts are deceitful above all things and cannot be cured. And that as we look at this text, the greatest sin here is the sin of idolatry. And that's the sin of the people of the book. It's the turning a good thing into a God thing and forgetting the God of all good things. So, in conclusion, let's ask God to show us better ways to trust him. Because in this text, he has sovereign control of every aspect of human history from his holy temple. I want to say he doesn't even have to get out of his armchair. He can control everything with the ease that I can change the channels on my TV. Just press a button and it happens every single time perfectly. If it doesn't, I think the world's going to come to an end. His sovereign remote control of all things is our source of security. It's the message that we've been given to give to the world. And we need to ask the Spirit to help us to be better explaining this to our neighbors and our friends, in order that they can be part of this great day when the glory of the Lord fills the earth. And instead of them experiencing a day of judgment and darkness, they'll experience a day of vindication and light. Because we've played our part in his mission and ministry to bring light to the world. And we can, by seeing what's certainly going to happen, the negative, we know that the good will come too, and we know that it helps us to make sense of our lives now. And that will help people lost, the very people that Jesus talks about, the lost coin, the lost sheep. It's the same message again and again. And that's one of the things that God uses again and again to remind us of his trustworthiness and his faithfulness.